Types of defensive reactions. Please follow along in your textbook starting on page 415. Cognitive dissonance is an inconsistency between two pieces of information, attitudes, or behaviors. One way to eliminate dissonance is to accept what the other person is saying and revise how you present yourself, but most people are unwilling to admit they were wrong. Therefore, there are 3 ways in which we can solve dissonance without saying the other person is right. They are attacking the critic, distorting the critical information, or avoiding the dissonant information. Each one of these broad ways to resolve dissonance that we will be describing later on are characterized by defense mechanisms, which are psychological devices that resolve dissonance by maintaining the self-image that the individual believes is threatened. The first type of defensive reaction that we will be discussing is attacking the critic. The first defensive maneuver for attacking the critic is verbal aggression, where the speaker uses verbal aggression to assault the critic directly. This usually shifts the blame onto the critic without acknowledging that the original judgment might be true, or they can be completely off subject. An example of verbal aggression in healthcare is when a healthcare professional tells a patient to exercise more, and the patient takes much offense to this and starts yelling back at the healthcare professional. The second way of attacking the critic is sarcasm. This is where the speaker disguises the attack with humor, for example, sarcastic remarks. This is a less direct form of aggression. An example of sarcasm in health sciences is when a chubby healthcare professional tells a chubby patient to lose weight. The patient usually says some sarcastic remark back to the doctor saying that he should lose some weight too.
Distorting critical information is another way of defending yourself. It's when you distort information in a way that leaves the presenting self intact. The first way of doing this is rationalization. This is when you explain an unacceptable behavior or feeling in a rational or logical manner, avoiding the true reasons for the behavior. For example, if we were to get a bad mark on this assignment, we would probably blame the person that marked it instead of ourselves. Another example is here we have 2 nurses, Nurse Anne and Nurse Julie, and Anne needs Julie to help her with a patient, but Julie doesn't want to, so she says, "I would help you, but I have paperwork that I have to do," just so she can avoid the unpleasant chore. Another way of distorting critical information is compensation. This is when you stress a strength in one area to compensate for a weakness in another. For example, Nurse Anne is mad at Julie for being late for her shift, where Julie may say, "Sorry I was late for work. Let me place that IV for you. I'm really good at it," to cover up the fact that she was late. Acts of compensation are okay in themselves, but the harm comes when they are unsincerely used to maintain a fictitious presenting image. The last way of distorting critical information is regression. This is when you play helpless and say you can't do something when you're just unwilling to do it. A test for regression is to simply replace the word can't with won't. So let's look at an example. Nurse Julie is mad at Anne for not placing an IV in her patient. Anne says, "I wish I could place that IV, but I can't. I'm just not ready to do that yet." Just because she doesn't want to do it, and not because she's unable to.
Avoiding dissonant information altogether is a third way to protect a threatened presenting image. Avoidance can take several different forms, including physical avoidance, repression, apathy, and displacement. Physical avoidance is the first defense mechanism in which a person steers clear of people who attack the presenting self. It does a lot of harm when someone is being battered by hostile or abusive criticism, and it is best to avoid it. However, sometimes when the relationship is important enough and the criticism is valid, it does more harm to avoid the situation. Repression is another defense mechanism in which a person mentally blocks out dissonant information. Changing the subject, acting as if you don't understand, and even pretending you don't hear the criticism, all are examples of repression. Apathy is when a person acknowledges unpleasant information but avoids admitting emotional pain by pretending not to care about the event. For example, a person might respond to losing a job by acting indifferent and tell himself or others that it doesn't matter because it was a stupid job anyways. Displacement is the last defense mechanism against avoiding dissonant information and occurs when a person vents hostile or aggressive feelings on a target that cannot strike back instead of on the true target. Despite the obvious costs of displacement, it almost always lets us preserve the image that we're in control and can't be pushed around by forces beyond our control.